Throbbing Gristle was formed in 1975. Their self-created label, Industrial Records, intended the term industrial to evoke the idea of music created for a new generation, with previous music being more agricultural. Peter Christopherson was inspired by William S. Burroughs' cut-up tapes. He invented a sampler machine and built a sequencer with the ability to play field recordings from multiple tape decks during live performance. The band didn't want to fall into the song structure pit of having a drummer, so Chris Carter sampled percussive sounds to drive the beat on a modular synthesizer that he built. Cozy Fanny Tootie and Genesis Peorage drew from their experiences of sex work, Brit queer culture, and anti-establishment performance art to craft lyrics. Throbbing Gristle used aggressive experimentation and deconstructed song structure as it was known. This approach reflected how queer people need to construct their own identities and build their own chosen families, independent from heterosocial conventions. Two of the primary themes in TG's music are sex and violence. Queerness was defined as deviant by the establishment at that time, directing violence at the idea of queer sex. TG brings our human potential for violence and perversity out in the open regardless of social standing. The first-wave industrial bands drew creatively from the artistic movements of Futurism, Dada, and Surrealism, less from 20th century art music as sometimes stated, with the exceptions being Karl-Heinz Stockhausen and Brian Eno, whose influence was more philosophical than musical. Punk rock kicked off at about the same time and shared the ideal of art made accessible to anyone, regardless of classical training. Contemporaries of TG include Cabaret Voltaire, who were also building their own sound gear and whose goal was to make music without musical instruments, and Einstürzende Neubauten, who were heavily deconstructionist and conceptual in the way they questioned traditional assumptions. Wax Trax Records was formed in 1981 by a couple, Danny Flesher and Jim Nash. Their goal was to improve queer representation in the media. They felt alienated during the early days of the AIDS epidemic. They saw how reluctant the U.S. government was to view queer people as human. Wax Trax Records would now provide a home for social outcasts, as well as showcase underground artists. Though they had a particular affinity for industrial music, the label signed a wide variety of artists from neighboring subcultures. This was the way of survival for people outside the mainstream. If your group was small and it didn't fill the space, invite like-minded folks from allied groups to help you fill it. Coil was formed by John Balance and his life partner Peter Christopherson of Throbbing Gristle in 1982. The most industrially relevant group to form from the ashes of TG, Coil broadcast their identity as a gay pagan band during a time when 80s pop music was not yet out of the closet. Their sound was experimental yet approachable, and their foray into steady beats still provided samples and noise. As with first-wave industrial, their influences were less often musical and more explicitly philosophical and occult. They released a cover of Soft Cell's Tainted Love, and the profits were donated to the Terrence Higgins Trust. It was the first AIDS benefit music release. Coil gained a critical respect that few industrial bands received beyond the early 80s. The mid-80s marked a shift in industrial music towards listenability. The express use of dance beats increased due to synths being commercially available. Their programming imposed a rigid 4/4 time signature that shaped both underground and pop music of that era. David Tibet of the group Current 93 said, "Industrial music became dance music. I never understood why people started dancing." Electronic musicians existed outside the narrow range of what was considered acceptable masculine sound. The majority of industrial artists mentioned thus far originated in Britain, before the internet was a way to share music, and during a time when music was shared via cassette tape over vast networks of snail mail pen pals. Meanwhile, in Belgium, where English was not a dominant language, industrial musicians were relatively isolated. Electronic body music was was born as a reaction to the heteronormative guitar rock of the time, with aggressive 4/4 beats and barking lyrical delivery. Notable EBM acts of the time were DAF and Front 242. Their displays of bodily strength and military aesthetic empowered new possible identities in the electronic music scene and appealed to gay and straight audiences. Cultural conditioning dictated that anything aggressive or abrasive be considered masculine, and the antithesis of feminine or queer. This was not a viewpoint shared by industrial fans. The genre's history reveals the essential role queer people have played in its foundation. Fans may be attracted to industrial due to its irreverence, chaotic sound, or its dance floor potential. There are many possible reasons why this challenging and confrontational genre is beloved by the queer community.